Biden stated, we will remain in close contact with Israel's leaders. And let me be clear, if Iran or its proxies take actions against the United States or further action against Israel, Iran will be held responsible. We note Secretary-General Guterres' statement warning that the region is at risk of plunging into a deeper and wider war on multiple fronts. The United States is not seeking escalation. Our actions have been purely defensive in nature. The best way to prevent such escalation is an unambiguous condemnation from the Council of Iran's unprecedented large-scale attack and an unequivocal call on it and its proxies and partners to refrain from further violence. Our goal is to de-escalate and then get back to the issue at hand, securing an end to the conflict in Gaza by getting a ceasefire in Gaza through a hostage deal, as well as surging humanitarian assistance to Palestinians in need. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the United States and pass the floor to Ecuador.
Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam President. I wish to
Malta.
thank the Secretary-General for the information provided. I also welcome the presence of the permanent representatives.
No, you guys don't understand. When Israel bombed the Iranian embassy compound, that was purely defensive. But when Iran retaliated as a consequence of having their soil be attacked by Israel first, that was purely offensive and unprecedented. Technically, it is unprecedented. It's just not unprovoked. Not wrong to call that unprecedented because, you know, they are attacking Israeli soil. But to say that it's unprovoked would be incorrect.
Which keep civilians in the chokehold of insecurity and anguish. I conclude by urging all to exercise the utmost restraint and to prioritize diplomatic and political instruments for the resolution of conflicts. I also call upon all to consider in good faith supporting the United Nations, regional bodies, groups of countries, all countries, with a view to easing this alarming situation, which, as the Secretary-General has stated, could lead to military conflagrations on a large scale in the Middle East. Thank you.
Algeria.
Shukran.
Thank you, Madam President. At the outset, I would like to thank the Secretary-General, Mr. António Guterres, for his thorough briefing. The Security Council meets today in the wake of the developments in the Middle East yesterday that actually create a threat for a very dangerous escalation that could bring the region and the world to an even more dangerous stage where things get out of control
captions.
and whose results cannot be predicted. My country, Algeria, is following these developments with utmost concern and interest and warns against grave consequences should the circle of conflict in the Middle East broadens. That's why we call upon all parties to practice self-restraint and avoid escalation. Would like also to reiterate what the SG has said, and I quote, that neither the region nor the world can afford another war, end of quote. And we have warned during the Security Council's session that have discussed the attacks launched by the Israeli occupation forces on the Iranian embassy building in Damascus at the beginning of this month. We have warned against the aftermath of not putting an end to this arrogance and behavior of the Israeli occupation in the region. And we have always emphasized that this could bring the whole region into conflict. And today you can see that our point of view was correct and our wording was honest. That's why the Middle East is undergoing very critical circumstances that makes it incumbent upon all international actors to listen to the voice of wisdom so that we can all sail to safety together, while emphasizing that international peace and security cannot be observed without giving the utmost priority to the principles and targets of the United Nations Charter, the policy of double standards, and adapting and tweaking and focusing on the contradictions.
I think Algeria literally supported Iran too.
As per whims and desires of some, would undermine our international order. Today we are at a crossroads. Either we hold tight to the international law without any adaptation or cajoling or blandishment, or we risk being submerged into chaos and lack stability. The crises in the Middle East are part and parcel of each other, and they are all interrelated, and that's why the root causes should be addressed, and the root cause is the Israeli occupation. The recent developments cannot overrule or cover the central question, which is the aggression on the unarmed Palestinian people in Gaza, and at the same time, we can never use as a pretext or cover to launch a land attack against Rafah. And we would like to reiterate that it is totally rejected and we need to avoid any attack on Rafah because its ramifications on the region would be catastrophic. We would like to reiterate that the de-escalation things in the Middle East on the short term would have to go through reaching a ceasefire in Gaza and also to put an end to the heinous killing machine and the collective punishment that's being carried out against the Palestinian people. Sustainable peace and security in the region would only be attainable through empowering the Palestinian people of its legitimate rights and inalienable right as well, and to put an end to Israeli occupation across all Arab territories. And that's why the Security Council should rise to the occasion and deliver on its functions on the protection of international peace and security and prevent any further deterioration, and therefore to work afterwards seriously on establishing the independent Palestinian state with Al-Quds al-Sharif, Jerusalem, its capital, and to put an end of the Israeli occupation of all Arab territories. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank the representative of Algeria and pass the floor to Japan.
Thank you, Madam President. I also thank Secretary-General for his timely briefing on this urgent matter. We are now witnessing an extremely dangerous situation that could cause catastrophic consequences for the whole region and the world. Japan is deeply concerned about the attack by Iran against Israel using numerous drones and missiles, which put huge population in real danger and could further aggravate the current turmoil in the Middle East. Japan strongly condemns such an escalation. We are seriously concerned that this large military action will increase the already extremely heightened tensions in the Middle East and lead to a wider and more serious regional confrontation with global security and economic ramifications. It is imperative for the Security Council to address this matter as a united body responsible for international peace and security to contain the risk of the region.
I'm burning my manga. We're doing BDS on anime,
Japan
boys.
has been strongly urging the parties concerned to calm down and de-escalate the situation and exercise maximum restraints, as the Secretary-General just mentioned. Japan reiterates its determination to continue to make all necessary diplomatic efforts in order to prevent a further deterioration. We must
lighting up my body pillow. I mean, of course, Japan is America's lapdog. Of course, they're gonna like we condemn in the strongest terms. Algeria is the only one who's going to have some smoke.
President. I wish to thank the Secretary-General for his briefing. France condemns in the strongest terms the unprecedented attack that was launched by Iran against Israel yesterday and which threatens to destabilize the region. The Secretary-General also condemned this attack. That attack was a serious and major...
It's really up what Iran did. It totally threatens to destabilize the region. It's definitely not Israel that is threatening to destabilize the region.
Such an unprecedented act. Iran crossed a new threshold in its destabilizing action and is risking a military escalation for which it would be responsible. We call upon Iran and its allies to, at long last and without further delay, cease their destabilizing activities throughout the region. France expresses its solidarity with the Israeli people and recalls its commitment to the security of Israel, of our partners, and to regional stability. We welcome the fact that, very fortunately indeed, Israel was able to successfully repel that attack. That made it possible to avoid the worst and spare many civilians. France is working towards de-escalation with its partners in the region, and we call for restraint. President of the Republic, Emmanuel Macron, and the Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs, Stéphane Séjourné, are working assiduously on that task. France is fully mobilized to find a settlement to the crisis besetting the Middle East, for de-escalation and to enforce the principles that underpin our international order. In Lebanon, we've made proposals to the two parties with a view to reaching, through dialogue, a cessation of hostilities. In Gaza, France is striving to bring about the immediate and unconditional release of hostages and to bring about an immediate and lasting ceasefire. It is high time, 6 months after the terrorist attacks of October 7th and the beginning of the war in Gaza, to lay the foundation for a lasting political settlement to this crisis by tackling the root causes of the conflict. That is what is proposed by the draft resolution that we have proposed to this council. We call upon all members to support it. We must leave no stone unturned in avoiding a new war in the Middle East. Thank you.
United Kingdom.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Secretary-General, for briefing us today. The United Kingdom condemns unequivocally Iran's reckless attack against Israel, which risks thousands.
Guys, technically, they keep saying unprecedented, and what they want to say is like unprovoked, but they can't say unprovoked. But it's a good substitute to say it's unprecedented because it technically is unprecedented, Iran striking Israeli soil, right? But like, if you don't follow the news, you're like, oh my God, these Iranian guys, they're out of control here. As though for 2 weeks, they haven't been spelling out that Israel's actions are genuinely unprecedented and also technically unprovoked. Striking an embassy is an act of war. Iran is technically correct for retaliating. The notion that Israel is always small bean and always defending itself is obviously ridiculous. But the reason why they're having this conversation is because most people don't pay attention. They hear, oh wow, Israel killed a bunch of like white guys. That was really up, but overall, I guess like they're being a little aggressive, but they're defending themselves for October 7. And also, nobody knows about the fucking embassy attack. So they're just only thinking about this as like, well, Iran struck again. And it's time, I guess, that, Israel and the coalition forces show Iran why we don't have health care here in the United States of America.
Stabilize the situation and prevent further escalation. It is vital that all parties exercise maximum restraint and refrain from any action that may heighten tensions further in the region. We also call on Iran to release the MSC Ares and its crew unconditionally and without delay. Iran's actions do nothing to advance the prospects for peace in Israel and Gaza. As set out in Security Council Resolution 2728, the United Kingdom remains resolved to work with international partners to secure an immediate pause in the fighting in Gaza, to get aid in and hostages out, leading to a sustainable ceasefire without a return to destruction, fighting, and the loss of life. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom and pass the floor to Mozambique.
Thank you, Madam President. We thank Malta's presidency for convening this urgent meeting. We highly value the insights provided by His Excellency Mr. António Guterres, Secretary-General of the United Nations on this crisis. Madam President, precisely
I find it funny that Iran pretends that they aren't aggressors, as if they didn't orchestrate the pillage and on October 7th. No, they literally didn't. And that's not just like the Iranian sentiment. That's not the statements coming from Iran. They literally said like, October 7 is dope, but we didn't do anything about it. Like, don't give us the credit for it. And it's also sentiment shared by not only the Iranian leadership, but sentiment shared by unlikely allies. The United States of America and Israel also openly stated that October 7 was a Palestinian resistance movement that was not, as a matter of fact, was not communicated with prior with Iran. Iran also noticeably, my fault then, misremembered it. Iran also noticeably was absent from the conversation after Israel violated red lines that the axis of resistance had against Israel's actions in Gaza. Iran didn't do shit after Israel struck Beirut. Iran didn't do shit until Israel struck their embassy. Anyway, I suspect that this could be another one of these chatters who's only now come back after October 7. We welcome you here, okay? I hope you stick around and maybe you will hear some information that is, that you're unfamiliar with. But that's why, welcome back. Don't be mean to the guy, okay? He's here on a learning journey.
It is imperative that all parties involved, Israel and Iran in particular, strictly abide by the Charter of the United Nations that compels all member states to refrain from the threat of use of force.
Hasan, they're 30 months up. They're a clear fan. No, they are. There's a bunch of fallen fans post October 7 that I've talked about before, that maybe were fine with my commentary and coverage on Israel beforehand, but post October 7 were like, nah, too far. I suspect is one of those guys. They clearly left and sent you a message on October 8th, lol. Yeah, there's a lot of people like that have been long-term community members, community subscribers that were just like, yeah, this shit. I can't believe it. This is unconscionable that you would lay the hands of the violence and atrocities on October 7 in the hands of Israel, the state actor in the region, the apartheid state. It's just like a lot of people go, oh, but your coverage hasn't changed on Israel. It has not, but it doesn't matter. Their perspective might have become a little bit more aggressive post October 7. I think a lot of liberal Zionists that agreed with me on many issues, especially as it pertains to American domestic politics, had a very different attitude about Israel. While in the past, they might have ignored my commentary on Israel being an apartheid state, or maybe even like to a certain degree agreed with it because they were like, well, Netanyahu is responsible for it. They legitimately felt differently about it, you know?
Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Mozambique and pass the floor to the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank Secretary-General Guterres for his important briefing on the grave situation in the Middle East, including yesterday's attack by Iran against Israel. The Republic of Korea is gravely concerned about the current situation in the Middle East, exemplified by yesterday's attack by Iran against Israel, using numerous drones and missiles. The Republic of Korea condemns these large-scale attacks, which are not in compliance with international law.
This is actually really interesting.
To make the situation worse, freedom of navigation is now being threatened, not only in the Red Sea, but also at the Strait of Hormuz, which cannot be justified, regardless of any excuse.
Korea is also kind of
interesting. Since the outbreak of the horrendous terrorist attack by Hamas against Israeli citizens on the 7th of October last year,
yeah, they're a client state, but it's a major deal that
Gaza and
Samsung Next is pulling out of the Israeli tech industry.
The international community, including the Republic of Korea, has repeatedly warned against the possibility of increasingly dangerous spillover in the Middle East. Earlier this month, when we witnessed the instance at the Iranian consulate that resulted in casualties in Damascus, Syria, the Republic of Korea expressed its deep concern that additional violent incidents could escalate into new tragedies in the region. Unfortunately, what we are now seeing this even more dangerous tension.
Samsung Next left because of economic reasons and not because of the genocide.
Amidst the worst escalation in the Middle
East, it means that like
the entire
pressure
region
is
stands at the risk of being engulfed in the flames of war. What is crucial is finding the most effective solution to ease the tension, rather than finger pointing and the debating over who and what triggered the current situation. Thus, the Security Council should gather the wisdom of all its members. We can still step back from the brink. The ongoing escalation of the already dire tension in the region should immediately stop. Any regional escalation should be condemned, and the regional actors should exercise full restraint in order to prevent any additional spillover. Thus, we take note that the permanent representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran expressed in his letter to the Secretary-General yesterday the position that Iran does not seek escalation or conflict in the region.
Korea is better than Japan in this.
That this affirmation can be realized with actual compliance. The Republic of Korea is monitoring this situation with a deep concern and once again calls on all parties to exercise restraints in order to prevent further escalation of the situation. Let me conclude by reiterating again what Secretary-General Guterres pointed out yesterday in his statement and today in his briefing. Neither the region nor the world can afford another military confrontation. Immediate de-escalation is, as everybody understands, an urgent collective need at this critical juncture. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Korea and pass the floor to Switzerland.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam President. We welcome the swift convening of the Security Council, and we thank the Secretary-General Guterres for his statement detailing the events of the recent events, and we underscore our common responsibility. Switzerland firmly condemns the coordinated attacks by Iran on targets in Israel last night. These attacks are part of a spiral of violence which is already dangerously underway in the region, as we also saw with the airstrike against Iran's consulate in Damascus on the 1st of April, an attack that Switzerland also condemned. Each of these attacks increases the risk of further escalation in the region. We also note with concern the seizure of the MSC Ares, a Portuguese-flagged ship, by the Iranian armed forces in the Strait of Hormuz. We have repeatedly warned against the risk of accelerating the spiral of violence in the region. It is imperative that all parties in the region and those with influence over them exercise the utmost restraint to avoid further.
I need to explain something to you guys, by the way. But here, there's the new meta is going to be like New York Post and other like dish rags basically saying that like, no, Israel struck the embassy because one of the generals there, one of the IRGC generals at they killed was actually instrumental and the architect of October 7, that is objectively untrue. Every single State Department employee, including the Israeli ones, said that they did not think that Iran was involved in the planning of October 7. Beyond the fact that, like, obviously Iran is always plays a fundamental role in training the people, in training Hamas militants, in funding and facilitating arms to the armed resistance. And yet the October 7 attacks were done without Iranian go-ahead, without Iranian knowledge. So now they're turning around and saying, no, actually, it is the guy. He was the guy. He was the architect of October 7. Why is that coming out now? That's because people are starting to question why the Israel attacked the embassy. And as soon as people start questioning why the Israel attacked the embassy, the Iranian embassy, people are going to want answers for it. And that's why you're seeing chatters in here repeating those lines, despite the fact that early on, originally, they said that Iran, and kept this narrative through, which, if you recall, if you were in here back then, even I thought was shocking. Even I thought was very odd that both America, Israel, and Iran were saying that that Iran did not play a role in October 7. So just remember that. Israel also is claiming that it wasn't an embassy. Israel also is claiming that it's not a real consulate building. Israel is also claiming that maybe they didn't do it, but if they did, it was actually good and valid. So you have to remember that. Like, they're just trying to throw shit at the wall to see what sticks.
Today, for example, about the now regular attacks by Israel against neighboring Syria and Lebanon. If such such things will continue unnoticed, then your appeals to restraint by all parties which we share can become futile. Distinguished colleagues, when we met in this chamber on the 2nd of April so as to discuss the strike by Israel against the consular premises of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Damascus, we warned that what was needed was a strong and unified signal by the Council that such actions were unacceptable, and not only against the sovereign states of Iran or Syria, and not only in the Middle East, but anywhere in the world. We called upon the colleagues in Security Council to clearly and unequivocally condemn such reckless steps to make sure that they don't get repeated. We also warned that otherwise the risk of a repeat of such acts and the general escalation in the region would grow manifold. We even proposed a draft press statement by the Security Council, and this was put together on the basis of standards for such cases, depoliticized language. And what did we hear at that time from our Western delegations? They said that for them not everything was clear and obvious, and what was necessary was to assess and see whether such a signal from the Council will help stabilize the situation in the region. The United States, UK, and France there essentially declined to confirm that the basic principles of international law about the inviolability of diplomatic and consular facilities, which are enshrined in the Vienna Conventions on this issue, apply equally to all states. And the outcome is now clear for everyone to see. You know very well that an attack against a diplomatic representation is a casus belli under international law. And if a Western representation had been hit, you would immediately have rained down reprisals and would argue that
I hate
you
that
were
the
right.
worst guy is making the best point.
And this is because for you, everything that has to do with Western representations and Western citizens is sacred. It needs to be protected. But when it comes to other countries, their rights, including the right to self-defense, about their nationals, well, that's a different matter, as you like to say. What happens then is you activate your favorite argumentation about lack of information, you start doing legalistic hair splitting, etc. And today in the Security Council, what we're witnessing is a display of hypocrisy and double standards, which it's almost embarrassing to watch. Russia has warned on many an occasion that the fact that many crises in the Middle East are unsettled, first and foremost in the area of Israeli and Palestinian conflict, which are frequently fueled by irresponsible, unilateral, and provocative acts, will lead to a growth of tension in and the whole region. We have stated on many an occasion that no country in the Middle East or Northern Africa should become an arena for regional or international confrontation.
I mean, listen, Russia is no more hypocritical in their sentiment than the United States is, for the record. Like, it is, my opinion on the matter is that, like, when they come out and chirp about Western hypocrisy, it feels hollow in the same way that, like, when Americans talk about, like, how dangerous and destabilizing Iran is, and it's like, bitch, do you know who you are?
Because Syria is constantly being bombarded by Israel.
That's it.
Many of
they're doing their own
did not find the courage to state clearly that the outburst of violence in the Middle East is developing against the background of an operation which is
obviously no one is more hypocritical than the United States in this circumstance, and no more consistently hypocritical.
By
but
West Jerusalem and Gaza and West Bank.
That's
and
a bold-faced lie. We are not invading our neighbor. Please don't do that,
Security
Hasan.
Council Resolution 2728.
Wait, what do you mean? That's a bold-faced lie. We are not invading our neighbor. The United States of America literally has been funding and facilitating Israel's genocide while simultaneously talking about how Israel is actually not the destabilizing principal here, the principal actor, but it's actually Iran. The are you talking about? It's not supposed to be a direct one-to-one comparison. America doesn't need to invade Mexico. We already fucking dominate both Mexico and Canada. Also, are you fucking nuts? Do you think that America is not America, the nation with 300 plus military bases all around the world? Is ridiculous. Our troops are not bombing them, though. That is ridiculous. We just pulled out of Afghanistan. Are you forgetting? What are you talking about? Our troops are not bombing them. Our bombs are bombing them. We have outsourced the bombing and death and destruction of the Palestinian population to Israel. That's so weird. I get that, but Russia is smoking ops right now. Bro, the fact that you got this ass pain about me making a comparison between Russia and America is really funny, because the United States of America absolutely is directly involved in this conflict, and you can't have a consistent position on this where you have to act like, no, Russia is actually worse. Russia is actually worse. It's just like, you please look at the situation with a better, with a different lens. If you consider Russia's actions to be bad, but America's actions ultimately to be not bad. They're both bad. They can both be wrong. Yes, I know. That's what I'm saying. He's mad that I'm saying they're both bad. He's mad that I'm saying that Russia is awfully hypocritical when talking about the hypocrisy of the West while they're doing their own fucking invasion. Americans don't even want me to say that. They get mad. They're like, they are the hog version of those who push Z. People who would come in here and say that you cannot bring up Russia. Russia is actually anti-imperialist, blah, 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 when they're doing their own fucking version of American activities in Ukraine.
And we urge West Jerusalem to follow suit and reject the practice of provocative use of force in the Middle East, as they are fraught with extremely dangerous risks and consequences for the whole region, which
also,
is already...
as far as like invading your neighbors goes, one could argue that you can make a clear-cut national security argument for invading a fucking neighbor. America invades countries that are 6,000 miles away. What the fuck do you mean? It's literally worse. It's closer to colonialism when you operate a colony.
Forward to hearing the statements to be made by Iran,
anyway.
Israel and Syria, respectively, on the evolving situation. Since the Gaza conflict began, the international community has deplored the unacceptable humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza and made strong demands for an immediate ceasefire to end the hostilities. It has also expressed grave concerns at how a prolonged conflict would exacerbate the tensions in the region with serious compounding spillover effects. On the 1st of April, Iran's diplomatic premises in Syria were targeted in an airstrike, resulting in multiple casualties on the Iranian side and serious damage to the said premises. This incident was a serious violation of the UN Charter and international law, as it violated both the sovereignty of Syria and that of Iran. It was of a most egregious nature. A moment ago, Secretary-General Guterres briefed us on the escalation that happened on the 13th of April, which China finds highly concerning. We have also noted that, according to Iran, its military action was in response to Israel's aggression against its diplomatic premises, and the matter can be deemed concluded. China calls on the parties concerned to show maximum calm and restraint and resolve their differences and disputes in accordance with the purposes of the UN Charter and international law to avert any further escalations. Madam President, this round of escalations is the latest manifestation of the Gaza conflict spilling over to the wider region. It serves as another reminder that the Palestinian question remains central to the Middle East issue and bears on the peace, stability, and long-term security in the region. If the flames of the Gaza conflict are allowed to continue raging, then the adverse spillover is set to spread still further, making the region even more unstable. Countries and peoples in the Middle East have no desire for, nor can they afford, a larger conflict or war. Therefore, the top priority at this moment is an effective implementation of Resolution 2728 to bring about an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Ultimately, there is no alternative to the full implementation of the two-state solution. The only way to end the vicious circle of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict once and for all. We call on the international community, especially countries with influence, to play a constructive part in the maintenance of regional peace and stability. I thank you, Madam President.
A flex that he's not even using an auto translator. He's like, I speak perfect English, dog. I don't even need this shit. I speak every language on that table.
The Secretary-General for his
I don't need to hear this poo-poo caca nonsense.
Experiencing one of the bleakest and most volatile periods in modern history, which risks spiraling out of control if all sides do not take a step back. This was a point that Malta stressed on 2nd April, following the deplorable attack by Israel on the Iranian diplomatic premises in Damascus on 1st April. We had stressed the need for de-escalation and for maximum restraint to be exercised.
I can't use auto fucking captions. I know I want to, but they suck.
Regrettably,
you know what? Fuck it, dude. Here, watch here. Here you go.
Given the recent developments.
Here you go, dude. Here you go, chatter.
We emphasize our deep concern about the significant escalation posed by a large-scale attack consisting of drones and various missiles launched by the Islamic Republic of Iran against Israel. We are also concerned with Iran's seizure of the container ship MSC Ares. The vessel, along with its crew, must be immediately and unconditionally released. At a time when our focus should be on diffusing tensions and reducing conflict, including by advocating for an immediate and permanent ceasefire to the war in Gaza, facilitating the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, and ensuring the delivery of sustained humanitarian aid throughout Gaza, all we are witnessing are steps in the opposite direction. Iran's direct targeting of the State of Israel risks regional catastrophe, with innocent lives bearing the brunt of all hostilities. We stress that international law, including international humanitarian law, must be respected at all times. Once again, we reiterate our call on all parties to exercise maximum restraint, including in their messaging, to de-escalate and pursue peaceful and diplomatic solutions to all disputes. Let us be clear, the region finds itself in turmoil and stands on the precipice of unimaginable hostilities and suffering. As the Secretary-General outlined, and I quote, neither the region nor the world
saying Malta is a fake
can afford
country.
another war.
It is not a fake country.
I resume my functions as President of the Council. I now give the floor to the
hating on
representative
fucking
of
Malta. They're trying their best.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, yesterday, the Ayatollah regime, in blatant violation of the UN Charter and international law, attacked the State of Israel and launched 170 UAVs, 120 ballistic missiles, and 30 cruise missiles carrying 60 tons of explosive materials at Israel. This attack was launched from Iranian soil, as well as from Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, and Iraq. Colleagues, from the moment I began my tenure here, in every speech and in countless letters, I rang the warning bell regarding Iran. I called on this council to take concrete action against the Ayatollah regime. I made it clear that Iran and its hegemonic ambitions of global domination must be stopped before it drives the world to a point of no return.
I'll be honest.
To a regional war that can escalate.
I'll be honest, it's very brave of him to talk in front of the Hamas council.
No action was taken. And last night, the world witnessed an unprecedented escalation that serves as the clearest proof for what happens when warnings aren't heeded. Israel is not the boy who cried wolf. We have been screaming from the rooftops for years, trying to wake up the international community, but to no avail. If only this council would have internalized my words, it would not have needed the bone-rattling explosions of last night's attack to wake it up. Colleagues, last night, Iran proved again that it cares nothing for Islam or Muslims. The Iranian attack seriously injured Amina El-Khassouni, a 7-year-old Bedouin girl in Israel. But look at this video that shows how Israel intercepts Iranian drones above the Temple Mount and Al-Aqsa Mosque.
This is their new meta too. They're saying that Iran tried to bomb the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is ridiculous.
Here, you can look at it. This is the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Yeah, Israel loves Muslims famously.
To Iran, Israel's annihilation and igniting the region is more important than Islamic holy sites. The Ayatollah regime, in its plot to impose a global Shiite hegemony through its proxies, has even attacked Saudi Arabia, as we all remember, Aramco oil field, the United Arab Emirates, and anyone else they view as an obstacle. I ask the Algerian representative here, how this make you feel? Is this a price you support, attempting to blow up mosques and murdering Muslims? Yet, while this direct Iranian attack on Israel was the first of its kind, it is just the most recent chapter in a blood-soaked saga that started from the moment the Islamic Revolution reared its head. The Ayatollah regime has a clear plan.
He's like, Israel loves Muslims and defending Muslims. That's why we have collaborated with al-Nusra in Syria
radical Shiite
and
revolution
ISIS
across the globe. I assume you all know it. The Islamic regime of today
By the way,
is no
this is not for the Muslim world. This is for the Western world. This is just to be like, lol, look at how fucking stupid these guys are. They almost killed a Muslim girl that we don't give a shit about, obviously. Because like this argument only makes sense if you're like, only we get to kill Muslims. Like if you legitimately believe that like only Israel has a right to kill Muslims. It's the same principle behind like them saying it was a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket that blew up the Al Ahli hospital courtyard. If you know anything about the lack of representation of Bedouins in Israel, you would understand that this is a laughable statement coming from the Israeli government. They're only using this as a prop. It's no different than when Republicans talk about like homeless veterans or whatever. Homeless veterans when talking about undocumented migrants. Shouting,
Sieg Heil, these radical Nazi Islamists scream death to Israel, death to America, death to England. Just like the Nazi regime, the Ayatollah regime sows death and destruction everywhere it touches. For the past years, Ukrainian civilians have been killed from the skies with Iranian weaponry. President Zelensky, in condemnation of Iran's attack last night, said, and I quote, "The sound of Iranian Shahed drones, a tool of terror, is the same in the skies over the Middle East and Europe. This sound must serve as a wake-up call
Dude,
to
Zelensky
the free
is so
world."
bitch-made because Israel is the only reason why they don't have an Iron Dome. The way that Israel was able to defend itself, Ukraine could have as well if they were given a fucking Iron Dome.
Albania with cyber attacks and launches strikes against Kurds in Iraq. We all remember the 2021 attack on the oil tanker Mercer Street, in which British and Romanian crew members were killed. And just yesterday, Iran seized a Portuguese cargo ship. The crew being held right now by Iran includes Indian, Filipino, Pakistani, and Russian nationals. Iran threatens global maritime trade. Iran is not only a terror state, Iran is a pirate state. Colleagues, just this week, the court in Argentina held Iran directly responsible for the 1994 terror attack in Buenos Aires on the Jewish Community Center, which killed 85 people and wounded 300. And just like the Third Reich and their brutal SS officers, the Iranian regime not only spreads evil abroad, but also torments and murders their own citizens. In 2023 alone, the Ayatollah Ayatollah regime executed 834 Iranians. The regime oppresses women while murdering them for not wearing their hijab properly. When the Iranian people peacefully protest this brutality, they are suppressed by live ammunition. Hundreds of protesters were killed and thousands have been arrested.
Yeah, I love this coming from the guy who's defending the most murderous regime.
World with billions
the Israeli
of dollars.
regime.
What have you done to defend the world from Iran? Seriously, the entire globe is suffering from Iran, including the Iranian people. Please defend them. For years, the world has watched the rise of a Shiite Islamist Reich. Yet, just like during the rise of Nazism, the world has been silent, deafeningly silent. Mr. Secretary-General, Iran has been violating Security Council
Everything for Israel's projection is so good.
For years. They supply Hezbollah with weapons in violation of resolutions 1559 and 1701. They advance weapons proliferation in violation of resolution 2231. They violate resolutions 1540 and 2216. Why have you not used all possible means to condemn Iran and demand compliance?
Because the UN is Hamas, bro. That's why.
Why have you instead rolled out the red carpet for these genocidal jihadists? Why do you treat them as if they are interested in de-escalation when you know that the opposite is true? Colleagues, Iran's strategy has been crystal clear. Arm, fund, and train terror proxies across the globe, carry out Iran's murderous scheme of domination. But today, the mask of Iranian deniability has been removed. No more hiding and no more bluffing. No more shirking of responsibility. Iran has attacked Israel from its own sovereign territory, publicly and proudly. The mask is off. Iran, the #1 global sponsor of terror, has exposed its true face as the destabilizer of the region and the world. And now, right now, is when the world must stop ignoring Iran's crimes and take action. As Iran's mask has fallen, the world's complacency must also fall. The mask comes off and the gloves must come on. The snooze button is no longer an option. The only option is to condemn Iran and utilize every means necessary to make them pay a heavy price.
Dude, this is such a funny thing to demand from the UN Security Council while you're doing a genocide with an active genocide court case at the ICJ. He's like, it's time for international law to be used here. It's like, bro, what do you mean? If we were using international law, we would literally invade Israel right now. We would be holding every Knesset member at gunpoint, basically, with the exception of some. What the fuck?
In the UN Charter. It was an act of utter escalation that can drag the entire region and world into war. But can you imagine if the attack was carried out under an Iranian nuclear umbrella? Or if some of Iran's missiles had nuclear warheads? The regime that launched an unprecedented strike on Israel,
like, they didn't,
a fellow
but what if
member
they did?
state of the UN, is barreling towards nuclear capabilities. This is a terror state responsible for global destruction, and soon they will have nuclear capabilities. You all know that Iran is systematically violating the JCPOA and has enriched uranium up to 60% purity and even more. Iran's breakout time to produce an arsenal of nuclear weapons is now weeks. Mere weeks. No concrete action has been taken, and the IAEA inspectors have been kept in the dark.
Yeah, I wonder why. Donald Trump. You have Donald Trump to thank for that one.
Every member of this council. Take a moment to think what would happen if Ayatollah Khamenei could have launched a nuclear bomb last night.
These dumb fucks literally shit on Obama, and now they're talking about a signature foreign policy accomplishment as though they were always on board with it. Like, what the fuck do you mean? You didn't want Iran to be denuclearized.
Sanctions on Iran before it's too late. We need a world led by Churchills, not Chamberlains. Colleagues, on October 7th, Hamas, with Iranian funding, with Iranian weaponry, with training, carried out the most brutal massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. They slaughtered our children. They burned entire communities. They raped our women. They took families hostage and are abusing 133 hostages. Hezbollah, with its Iranian arms and sponsorship, have fired thousands of rockets into Israel since October 7th, decimating towns. The Houthis, with Iranian weapons and instructions and intelligence, are firing at every merchant vessel that is suspected of having ties to Israel. And then Iran, who directs and pays for all of this violence, carried out an attack of epic proportions on Israel. Colleagues, we are being fired upon from all fronts. From every border. We are surrounded by Iran's terror proxies. The war in Gaza extends far broader than Israel and Hamas. All of the terror groups attacking Israel are tentacles of the same Shiite octopus, the Iranian octopus. So I ask you,
many don't know this, but the OG HasanAbi doctrine was about Iran.
What would you do if you were in Israel's shoes? How would you react if your existence was threatened every single day? While the Ayatollah regime thinks, they only think, that Israel is a frog in a boiling water, that we are becoming accustomed to the threats on our survival and won't notice until it's too late, they are wrong. You are wrong. This attack crossed every red line, and Israel reserves the legal right to retaliate. We are not a frog in boiling water. We are a nation of lions. Following such a massive and direct attack on Israel, the entire world, let alone Israel, cannot settle for inaction. We will defend our future. Colleagues, despite the magnitude of the attack, 99% of Iran's UAVs and missiles were intercepted by Israel
he meant
and our allies. I wish to take this opportunity to thank the United States and our partners for standing with us in defending Israel against the Ayatollah regime indiscriminate attack. Yet, the fact that Israel's air defense proved to be superior does not change the brutality of the Iranian
You should
attack.
eat Kaya for lunch. She deserves
Iran
to be
can
eaten.
no longer hide behind its proxies. It has now exposed itself as the terrorist.
Yeah, we are a nation of lions, except please, America, let us do the deed.
From now on,
please help us, America.
It's not enough to remove Iran from the UN Commission on the Status of Women. Iran is the world's worst human rights violator, and such a regime cannot hold any UN position. No more red carpet treatment here at the UN. No more appeasement. Today, the Council must take action. Condemn Iran
for the
for
treatment
their
of women
terror.
only a year ago, but are now supporting their Sharia dictatorship. What is happening in Gaza is horrible, but supporting a terrorist state is the craziest take you commies have. What? Dude, I do not support the terrorist state of Israel. The theocratic terrorist state of Israel that is engaging in an apartheid, that is engaging in an ethnic cleansing campaign. I do not support it. Nor do I support the American terrorist state. I don't. Nor do I support the Russian state of terror. I don't support states of terror. It's very strange that you act like I am in favor of terrorism. Okay, I don't. That's for Iran is talking.
Its armed attack on 1st April.
Iran is going to say that the greatest
premises.
defense against Israel's apartheid is the 3-minute ad break at the top of the hour defense, which is a $5 a month subscription.
The armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran carried out a series of military strikes on Israeli military objectives with dozens of missiles and drones. Iran's operation was entirely in the exercise of Iran's inherent right to self-defense as outlined in Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations and recognized by international law. This concluded action was necessary and proportionate. It was precise and only targeted military objectives and carried out carefully to minimize the potential for escalation and prevent civilian harm. Madam President, we thank those members of the Council who condemned the Israeli armed attack against our diplomatic premises in Syria. Regrettably, in this chamber, certain members of the Council, including the US, UK, and France, have chosen once again to turn a blind eye to reality and overlook the root causes contributing to the current situation. In hypocritical behavior, these three countries falsely blamed and accused Iran without considering their own failures to uphold their international commitment to peace and security in the region. They made unsuccessful attempts to use lies, manipulate the narrative, spread disinformation, and engage in a destructive blame game. All the while, they deliberately disregarded Iran's inherent right to respond to the violation of a fundamental principle of international law, the inviolability of diplomatic representative and premises. Moreover, they ignored the the underlying root causes of the current situation in the region. For over 6 months now, these countries, especially the United States, have shielded Israel from any responsibility for the Gaza massacre, while they have denied Iran inherent right to self-defense against the Israeli armed attack on our diplomatic premises. At the same time, they...
At what point have I said that Iranian domestic politics is great and I support it? Did I? I didn't. Also, it's pretty funny. I love seeing white guys write Sharia in like a million different ways.
Against the people of Palestine by arbitrary and misleading interpretation of self-defense. Madam President, following the Israeli regime cowardly terrorist and armed attack against our diplomatic premises in Damascus, the Syrian Arab Republic, on the 1st of April, we notified the UN Security Council and Secretary-General of such international wrongful act, as well as of Iran's inherent right under international law to respond to such terrorist armed attack. Also, in a phone conversation with the UN Secretary-General on 2nd April, Iran Foreign Minister discussed the situation and called for taking appropriate action and a strong condemnation from the international community for this horrific crime. We called upon the Security Council to strongly denounce this unjustified criminal and terrorist act, taking decisive and appropriate measure to bring the perpetrators to justice swiftly and prevent the
really
recurrence of such horrible crime against the diplomatic premises of any member state. Regrettably, the Security Council has failed in its duty to maintain international peace and security. Russia proposed a press statement to denounce this atrocious act, which was backed by China, Algeria, and many members, but was blocked by the US, UK, and France. Faced with such circumstances, the Islamic Republic of Iran had no choice but to exercise its inherent right to self-defense under international law. Madam President, the root cause of the current situation are clear to all. From the start of the Israeli war against Palestinian people in Gaza, more than 34,000 civilians, 2/3 of them children and women, have been killed. All civilian infrastructures have been targeted and destroyed by Israel. Even humanitarian workers have not been immune from the military attacks of this rough regime. The absence of accountability and conscience in action faced with the Israeli genocide and war crimes against the Palestinian people has only emboldened this regime to continue its violation unchecked. The US and its allies have blocked the Security Council for over 6 months, protecting Israel from accountability for the Gaza massacre. They not only avoid condemning Israel for these atrocities, but also actively try to cover up them. Their sole priority is supporting and defending Israel regardless of the consequences and at all costs. Despite international pressure and UN Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire, Israel has defied this resolution. Rather, its focus remains on committing more atrocious crimes, showing no regard for international legal obligation. Madam President, this lawless regime has committed many atrocious crimes against our people. This regime blatantly and openly admitted its responsibility for the terrorist and destructive operation committed against Iranian officials, scientists, and civilians, and sabotage against our peaceful nuclear infrastructure in recent years. This Israeli regime even made explicit threats to use nuclear weapons against a sovereign member state of the United Nations. This terrorist regime is responsible for all criminal and terrorist acts committed against Iran and must bear the consequences. The Islamic Republic of Iran has warned time and again about the repercussions of the malicious activities of the regime on regional and international peace and security. Iran has exercised maximum restraint. Now it is time for the occupying regime to bear full responsibility for its consequences. This regime cannot avoid.
Kind of embarrassing for Iran if true. Many Iranian missiles failed to launch or crash before striking target. No, I mean that's not that crazy. It could be propaganda, but it could be true. I mean, ultimately they are fucking. They don't have America's tech.
Seeks to expand and escalate the conflict in the region to stay in power. The member of the Security Council must not allow such an august body, the Security Council, to be held hostage to the ambitions of such a belligerent regime. It is time for the Security Council to show shoulder its responsibility and address the real threat to international peace and security. The Security Council must promptly fulfill its duty under Chapter 7 of the Charter in response to Israeli reckless defiance. It must take urgent and punitive measures to compel this regime to stop its genocide and massacre against the people of Gaza and uphold its obligation, especially fully implement the UN Security Council resolution and legally binding orders of the International Court of Justice.
Bald.
The main and long-standing threat to the peace and security of our region is well known to all, and the attempts to conceal it through disinformation, a smear campaign, or baseless accusation against others are pointless and unfounded. Iran is never seeking to contribute to the spillover of the conflict in the region, nor does it to escalate or spread the tension to the entire region. Contrary to unfounded claims, Iran has no proxy in the region. No individual, group, or country act at the Iran behest. The US and Israeli regime attempt to label the resistance group in the region as the proxies or terrorists. Their sinister aim is only to justify and legalize their malicious and destabilize activities in the region. The resistance group are not proxies or terrorists. They are legitimate and are only fighting against occupation and aggression of Israel in Gaza and occupied Palestine territories and of the U.S.
Can someone fact check this guy? He's right.
International law
He's right. He's talking about the axis of resistance. It's resisting against American invasion and also Israeli involvement in the region.
The U.S. and the UK are fully responsible for all its decades-long aggressions.
People always talk about like the Iranian resistance is like, or the axis of resistance as though they're like completely fucking unable to make their own decisions on their own. Iran simply supplies them with the weapons, but they have a cause that they're willing to act on.
Consent, order, and all-out political, financial, and military support of and a collaboration with the United States and the UK. We reject the allegation made by the Israeli regime at this meeting.
This guy has horrible cadence. Why? Bro, you guys are such fucking dummies. It's very important that the Iranian envoy here is speaking directly in English.
The Islamic Republic of Iran.
Not a single one of the other fucking members of the council, with the exception of Israel, speaks English at the council. You know that, right? That's huge.
Commitment to the maintenance of international peace and security. The Islamic Republic of Iran reiterates.
He's speaking perfect English. That's a flex. That's deliberate. That's by design.
Escalation or war in the region, while warning about any further military provocation by the Israeli regime. The Islamic Republic of Iran reaffirms its unwavering determination to defend its people, national security and interests, sovereignty and territorial integrity against any threat or act of aggression, and to respond to any such threat or aggression vigorously and in accordance with international law. The Islamic Republic of Iran will not hesitate to exercise this right when required. Madam President, Excellencies,
I'll tell you in a second.
Iran has no intention of engaging in conflict with the U.S. in the region. We demonstrated our commitment to peace by exercising our restraint about involving the U.S. Army in intercepting Iranian drones and missiles bound for military target in the occupied Palestinian territories. This underscores our dedication to de-escalating tension and avoiding the expansion of conflict. However, if the U.S. initiate military operation against Iran, its citizen, or its security and interests, Iran will use its inherent right to respond proportionately. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran and pass the floor to the Syrian Arab Republic.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, what our region witnessed yesterday is a natural and inevitable outcome of repeated aggressions and grave violations of international law and the United Nations Charter perpetrated by the Israeli occupation authorities on the territories of my country, Syria, and other countries. In that, these authorities were taking advantage of the support offered by the U.S. administration in this council and elsewhere.
True, bro.
This American support, this blind and unlimited American support, has led the occupation authorities to mistakenly believe that they are above the United Nations and above international law and above the conventions and the resolutions that were adopted by our organization.
Something you have to remember is that, like, Israel currently occupies this dude's land in Golan Heights illegally, and America gave that land to them.
Crimes and their escalation of the situation in our region with no response and no consequence.
What is she doing?
My country, the Syrian Arab Republic, has warned the Security Council and the Secretariat repeatedly in official letters, warned of the dangers of an escalation, of the explosion that the Israeli occupation authorities are trying to spark to cover up for their military failure in Gaza and to find justifications for it to continue its genocide and other atrocities against the Palestinian people and the accompanying hysterical attacks on countries in the region. In our letters, we have repeatedly called upon the United Nations and the Security Council to take immediate action in accordance with their mandate. However, the U.S. administration and a number of its allies have obstructed any movement.
People love bringing up like, oh, well, Assad's a bad guy too. Yes. This is true. Or people be like, Iran is a bad regime. True. But it's like, bro, those are not our allies. You know that, right? Like, you have no way of controlling their behavior. You do, however, ostensibly have a way to control Israel's behavior. Those guys being bad does not give Israel credence or moral or any kind of like moral grounding to behave in the way that they're behaving. Israel is our ally. Israel cannot exist in the violent ways that they exist in without our unconditional support. It's so weird. It's just, it always is pure copium from NATO Andes to be like, oh, well, Assad is bad, Assad is bad, Assad is bad. And it's like, this has nothing to do with us. We are not giving Assad weapon systems so that he can laser his own population in the way that we are giving Israel weapon systems, guided munitions, F-15s, F-35s, F-15s, fighter jets, Mark 84 rockets. Like, there's no comparison.
Any additional escalation that threatens peace and security in the region. Syria stresses that our region has suffered enough from the violations perpetrated by the Zionist entity and the U.S. administration and its allies, violations of international law and the principles and purposes of the Charter. The time has come to take serious action where these states reconsider their
Assad is bad, which is why we have our colony annexes land and our multinationals occupy 80% of his oil fields. Exactly. Does that seem like a decent take?
Because
that is American policy currently.
Policies, including through imposing an immediate halt to the Israeli aggression on the Palestinian people and countries in the region. The states must guarantee full and unimpeded humanitarian access, and they must put an end to the intentional starving of the people of Gaza. Moreover, there must be an end to the illegitimate military presence of U.S. forces on the territory of my country, Syria. We must put an end
to the Moroccan
the
atheist YouTubers think you're a little too easy on Islamic countries as a fan. I am tilted.
We must put a stop to the sponsoring
they can suck my dick.
Terrorist
I don't care.
Organizations and separatist militias.
I know.
We demand.
I know how that shit works, bro. I was way more r/atheism adjacent when I lived in Turkey. I know, because you're angry at the enemies that you see among your ranks. When you grow up in Morocco and you have Islamist fundamentalists around you that are making your lives worse, you are going to develop a way more rugged, way more rigid attitude about Islam, and you're going to be way more aggro about that. In the Western world, it is not Islam that is the guiding motivator for a lot of reactionary thinking. The fundamentalism comes from Christianity. The problem is when you have people who think that the Islamist fundamentalists are representative of Islam as a whole because that's all you've seen in your country. Morocco is pretty chill Islam-wise. I know it's not Islamist, but it doesn't matter. Turkey's not Islamist either. Turkey has never been an Islamist fundamentalist country, and yet Recep Tayyip Erdogan is. So it doesn't matter. A country not being fundamentalist in the same way that Iran is, for example, in its leadership, does not change the reality that there are plenty of right-wing fundamentalists that are fucking up your life on a daily basis with their advocacy, sometimes with their control. That's what I'm saying. People see those who fuck up their lives and understandably get mad at that, and understandably are way more edgy about their perspective. There's an in-group, out-group dynamic here at play that many YouTubers, I guess, don't fully comprehend. I duke it out with a lot of the Turkish chatters in here all the time as well, under the exact same terms. That's part of the reason why many of the Turkish chatters sometimes when they come in here will falsely smear me and claim that I am actually a Islamist or a Fethullah Gülen supporter. It's ridiculous. It is completely ridiculous. Those very same Turkish chatters will sometimes also call me gay or the Turkish F word because I paint my fucking fingernail. I could not be further away from Islamist fundamentalism. If you were to listen to my advocacy, you would understand that. Anyway, the point is, in the Western world, there's a very different dynamic. In the Western world, there is religious suppression. There is a lot of religious suppression for Muslims. The Western world is very Islamophobic. The Western world is very anti-Arab, anti-Muslim, anti-MENA overall. So when I'm making an advocacy for religious freedoms, like protecting religious freedoms, a lot of people that are in Turkey misunderstand that for my advocacy for Islamist fundamentalism or something. And the same goes for the Moroccan YouTubers that you're mentioning as well, I suspect. It's ridiculous. I believe in, what, did they give you the wrong order? I believe in allowing people the freedom to practice whatever religion they want to, as long as it doesn't harm others. The very moment that you start trying to enforce rules and restrictions on other people on the virtue of religion, whether it be abortion in the United States of America or whether it be anti-LGBTQ legislation, well, that's a moment where I'm 100% against you. Okay, you're just admitted you're gay. I am not. Ask your mom. Anyway, let's continue.
Replacing it with the law of the jungle, with wars, and with instability. Syria is a founding member of the United Nations and continues to believe in this organization, in its principles, in its purposes. And we wish for it to undertake its role in maintaining international peace and security and in dealing with the root causes of the challenges that our country is facing, namely the Israeli occupation, which is an impediment to the peace and security.
There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.
We shall see what happens after this. I do think that Israel wants to do a attack on Iranian soil, claiming that they're going to hit like nuclear facilities or whatever, which would be a severe escalation in the form of retaliation, even though they hit the first strike on the Iranian soil already on the Iranian embassy. This would be the only thing worse than hitting an Iranian embassy, would be hitting Iranian soil directly. What the fuck is happening here? I get it. The update is complete. Jesus Christ, my Apple Watch. The importance of the Iranian rep speaking in English is that is to show the rest of the world that's watching the fucking UN Security Council that like they understand the ways of the West. They speak the language perfectly, which they do. That guy most likely, much like many of the other leaders in the MENA region or in Iran or even in Afghanistan, probably got Western or Westernized education. Many people don't recognize that. Many people don't realize that. It is that reason why, like Assad, I'm pretty sure Assad like is an optometrist that went to school in the UK. So many of those dudes literally go to college in the UK. So many of them study in the US. So many of them study in the UK. They get their higher education. It is the equivalent of fucking eating a McDonald's sandwich or something to get you to understand that they understand the Western world.